We have some people still joining. A bunch of people have already joined. Welcome to this last Neighborhood Health Series event of the year. I'm very happy to see we have some prospective students that have joined us tonight, current students, board members and parents, as well as community members. So we hope all of you are doing well and staying healthy. I really have great pride to see so many people here tonight. This series was started 5 years ago with really one very simple goal: to help people in our community source important information. Roseman is deeply committed to supporting its communities, and this series is really just an example of that. So if anyone that has joined us is interested in our programs, you can go to roseman.edu and check out information, and also to learn more about additional events. This is a monthly series, and so we'll be starting back up on January 21st. We'll be talking about COVID, vaccinations, and what life might look like, after COVID. You can check out all of those events at speakers.roseman.edu. Real quick, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Clark County Credit Union. They couldn't be here with us tonight, but this series would not be possible without their support, and they're a wonderful sponsor, and we're very grateful. I also like to thank my colleague Cameron Heyman, who's here today with us and making sure from an IT perspective, everything goes very smoothly. And with that, I'd like to introduce our very special guest and speaker. Sally Mickelson joined Roseman University as Director of Financial Aid in 2014. She began her career in financial aid in 1993 as a federal work studies student while she earned her practical nursing diploma in Minnesota. She has worked at a variety of institutions throughout her career, including community and technical colleges, four-year private nonprofit schools, private graduate level institutions, and vocational and technical institutions. She has advocated and provided testimony for student access to higher education to the Minnesota legislature on numerous occasions, and has presented at professional meetings on the national and state level to her colleagues on how to assist student borrowers in managing student loan debt. She is committed to Roseman students and graduates and is proud of the impact they have on our communities. And it really is true to say that this has been Sally's life's work. And so I'm very, very proud to welcome Sally Mickelson.
Thank you, Vanessa. And thank you everyone for joining me for the last Neighborhood Health Series of 2020, which I'm sure none of us will be sad to see 2020 go, and hope that 2021 will be much better. As she said, again, these presentations would not be possible without the support from Clark County Credit Union, so we appreciate their support of this. Okay, so let's get right to this. What I'm going to cover today is I'm going to give everybody a brief history of financial aid. We're going to talk about some details about types and sources of financial aid. I'm going to touch on the student loan forgiveness programs. Also, just a snapshot of some highlights on Roseman's financial aid programs. Let's get started. I'm going to take this way back to the history of financial aid in the United States. Really started with the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944, which FDR signed into law to benefit returning veterans of World War II. This was commonly called the GI Bill of Rights, which we have, of course, shortened to the GI Bill, which is what most of us know as the military benefit for college tuition since then, and it is known today. Lyndon Johnson signed the Higher Education Act of 1965, or the HEA as it's commonly known in higher education, which created the first federal grant program that was targeted at low-income students, called the Educational Opportunity Grant, or EOG. The HEA needs to be reauthorized by Congress about every 4 to 6 years. So I'm going to highlight just a few reauthorizations that were important. After the original 1965 Act, in 1972, the reauthorization split the EOG grant into two funds. First was the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, FSEOG, which went to schools, and the Basic Educational Opportunity Grant, which was given directly to students. In 1978, the next reauthorization introduced the Middle Income Student Assistance Act, which opened eligibility for federal subsidized student loans to all undergraduates, regardless of need, and it expanded the federal grant program, which they renamed to be what we know today, the Pell Grant, to include middle income students. Then, just before the dinosaurs left the earth and I entered the financial aid profession in 1990, Congress created through their reauthorization the Parent Loan for Undergraduate Study, or the PLUS loan, as well as unsubsidized loans were created and several federal tax credits in order to help offset the cost of college in the United States. There was a 2003 sort of semi-reauthorization that Congress, I say they punted because they didn't do a full reauthorization. Instead, they just renewed several sections of the 1990 reauthorization, excuse me, and they made very little radical change at that time. Then in 2008, the Higher Education Opportunity Act was used to reauthorize the HEA and made significant changes that led to several lawsuits across the United States about things like gainful employment and repayment rates. That reauthorization in 2008 was scheduled to expire in 2013, but Congress also builds in a one-year automatic extension so that reauthorization should have taken place by 2014. We all know it's 2020 today, and we have still not seen a full reauthorization of the Higher Education Act. So when are we going to see that next reauthorization? I mean this meme so seriously. Your guess is literally as good as mine. The bipartisan politics we've seen, and I've seen over my 27-year career in financial aid, has grown. And we live in Vegas, so I'm not a betting woman. And if there was anything to bet on, reauthorization would be the last thing I would bet on. I suspect we're going to see some movement on reauthorization in late 2021 into 2022. Again, I can't be sure. To be honest with you, reauthorization is good for us in financial aid because not having reauthorization is good for us because we just keep doing and supporting all the regulations as is, and we don't have to incorporate a whole bunch of new rules and regulations. So let's talk about the types of financial aid. In general, there are a few categories of financial aid. Grants and scholarships is the first one. I think we all would agree that is the best one because that is money that does not have to be repaid unless you withdraw from school and owe a refund. Work study, that's money you earn at a job that also does not have to be repaid. Student loans must be repaid regardless of the source they're from. And another type of financial aid that's come into the conversation really in the last 5 to 7 years is something called income share agreements. Those ISAs must also be repaid. Now I'm going to get into some of the details of the various types of financial aid. Federal financial aid is authorized under a section of the HEA called Title IV. So if you hear talk about Title IV financial aid, most of us just call that federal financial aid. And I'm going to talk about the specific grants that are authorized under Title IV. There's the Pell Grant, the FSEOG grant, Iraq and Afghanistan service grants, and then the TEACH grants. In case you don't know it already by seeing about 6 slides on my presentation, financial aid loves acronyms. We use acronyms all the time, every day in our lives, and when we're talking to other financial aid people, we speak in our own language, just like pharmacists and nurses and dentists and doctors, they all speak in their own language too. I'm saying this because it's a little bit of a disclaimer. I try not to speak in financial aid when I'm talking to students or prospective students, but sometimes I slip into that. So I'm just begging your forgiveness up front if I forget to define what an acronym is. The Pell Grant maximum for the 2021 academic year is $6,345 per year. Part of the reason we've seen such a rise in student loan borrowing over the last 10 to 15 years is because our federal grants have not kept pace with the rising cost of tuition. There are not a lot of community colleges or four-year schools where a Pell Grant will pay for an entire year of tuition and fees, since the maximum is $6,345. In addition, the FSEOG grant program offers supplemental grant funding to the Pell Grant. The FSEOG is actually awarded to colleges and universities across the United States, and we get to determine a policy for awarding that and what the maximum is. The federal maximum is $4,000 per academic year. I am not aware of a single institution in this country that gets enough funding to actually award $4,000 per academic year. Also, the FSEOG requires the institution to provide an additional 25% match to that. So it's just another way to provide additional grant funding for undergraduate students. As an example, Roseman's maximum award for the institutional match and the federal SEOG portion is only $650 per award year. We would love to give more money, but we're limited on how much we get from congressional law. The Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant was created in order to provide additional grant funding to students who had a parent that died as a result of military action performed in Iraq or Afghanistan after 9/11. The student had to be under the age of 24 at the time of their parent's death, but those students can get an additional $6,000 per academic year in the Iraq and Afghanistan service grants to help supplement the Pell Grant. The Teach Grant is exactly what it sounds like. It is for teacher education. It provides up to $4,000 per academic year for students who are going to be teachers, agree to teach in a high-need field at a school that serves low-income families. The Teach Grant requires 4 years of service at such a school in exchange for the grant. If a graduate does not perform those 4 years of full-time teaching in an 8-year period, that grant converts to a loan, so the teacher has to repay it at that time. Generally, federal grants are awarded to low-income students. Generally, that is incomes with families with incomes no more than 150% of the poverty level for your family size. And the poverty level is the same for the lower 48. Alaska and Hawaii have a slightly higher poverty level, but I like to bring your attention to this because this is not dependent on where you live. The poverty level from a federal perspective is the same for a family of 4 living in Las Vegas or a family of 4 living in the San Francisco area. We all know that the San Francisco cost of living is significantly higher than Las Vegas, but a Pell Grant and federal Title IV grants do not take those locations into consideration. Also, about 8 years ago, Congress instituted a cap on the amount of federal grants that students can receive. They are exhausted after 6 years of full-time education, which is 150% of a bachelor's degree, if we think of a bachelor's degree as 4 years, or once you've received a bachelor's degree, whichever is earlier. So we have a lot of students who take college classes during their junior and senior year of high school. Then they enter a four-year institution, and maybe they earn a bachelor's degree after only 2 years at that institution. Their Pell Grant and federal grant eligibility stops once they've received that bachelor's degree. Even if you go back to school, our ABSN program has a lot of students who have already received a bachelor's degree and they're deciding to come back to school to get their BSN. You don't get grants for that second bachelor's degree either, since you've already received one bachelor's degree. Also, there is the work study program. As Vanessa indicated in her introduction of me, I got my start in financial aid by being a work study student. I earned my LPN and I was a work study student, and I had intended to go get my BSN. And I really decided that I loved financial aid more than I loved nursing. So I decided to make a career of financial aid. So I say that when you go to school, if you're interested in a work study job, you may just find your lifelong passion through your federal work study job, and it may have nothing to do with the degree you earned. Like the FSEOG program, work study funds are awarded to institutions, and we are responsible for awarding them. And most institutions do not have enough work study funding to cover all of the students that are interested in work study. So if you're going to college, particularly if you're going to a traditional public university or as a freshman, I really encourage you to indicate your interest in the work study program on the FAFSA. The FAFSA is what you have to fill out to have a school determine your eligibility for any type of financial aid. And there's a box that says, I guess it's a bubble now, that says, are you interested in a work study position? If you say yes, your school hopefully will have enough money to award you federal work study funds. And if halfway through your freshman year you decide, I am just overwhelmed by academics and I cannot work a federal work study job, you just have to tell your institution, you know what, I don't want these work study funds anymore. And then your financial aid office will award them to another student who might be interested. But if you do the opposite and halfway through your freshman year, you suddenly say, oh, you know what, I really think I'd like a work study job now. Many times your school will have run out of funds and can't give you those funds. So I tell everybody, indicate yes to that on the FAFSA. Also, as part of our matching, we have to contribute 25% of wages as well. And we also have to dedicate at least 10% of our institutional funds to community service. Roseman, for example, has a contract with the Greater Salt Lake and the Southern Nevada Boys and Girls Club, not during COVID times, where we send students to the Boys and Girls Club to assist with homework and assist with some other things there as a way to meet our community service match. And institutions have all sorts of ways to meet their community service, but if that's something that you're particularly interested in, that might be another way to discover what some of these other community service organizations have to offer. Federal loans, they have grown exponentially over the last 15 years, and there are several types of federal student loans. Loans that are available in the student's name include the direct subsidized loan. The subsidized in the name of this means that the U.S. Department of Education pays the interest on your subsidized loan while you're in school until 6 months after you leave school. This is not a credit-based loan. It's not based on your credit. You're automatically qualified for it, but it is available only for undergraduate students. So once you get to be working on a grad degree, you're no longer eligible for subsidized loans. Instead, you're eligible for an unsubsidized loan. The unsubsidized loan means interest is accruing from the time it's dispersed to your school, and the student is responsible for paying that. You can defer those payments until 6 months after you leave school, but it costs you more in the long run if you can't afford to pay those loans or pay the interest that's accruing on those loans. These are also not based on credit, and they are available for both undergraduate, not undergrad, I apologize for the typo there, as well as graduate study. The last type of federal student loan that's available in a student's name is called the Direct Plus loan for graduate students. Interest also accrues on this from the time it's dispersed, and the student is responsible for paying it. This one, however, is a credit-based loan. It doesn't have significant credit criteria. They don't even look at your FICO score or your credit score. Instead, they look at your credit report to make sure you don't have collections or judgments or bankruptcies, or you don't have delinquencies in your current debt that's on your credit report. The one thing I want to add, I'm going to talk about interest rates in a couple of slides, but each of these has a small origination fee that's taken off the top by the U.S. Department of Education to help pay for collection costs and whatnot. On the subsidized and unsubsidized, that's just over 1%. But on the plus loan, it is over 4.2% in fees, and it has a higher interest rate. The loan that is another loan that is authorized under Title IV is called the Direct Parent Plus loan. That is in the parent's name that a parent can borrow to help their dependent undergraduate students pay for school and room and board. Interest also accrues on this, and the parent is responsible for paying that interest, but can also defer it for till the student graduates, 6 months after the student graduates. Again, the origination fee on this is 4.228% currently. Same credit criteria as the Grad Plus loan I was referencing earlier. The other thing about the Parent Plus loan, this will always be in the parent's name. You cannot transfer it to your student's name, even if the student is intending to repay it. There are some options where a student can take out a private loan and move their parent's plus loan in with their federal loans to consolidate that through a private consolidation loan. One of the very few silver linings I have found with this global pandemic is that interest rates on student loans have dropped to near historic lows. The undergraduate rate for subsidized and unsubsidized for the 2021 academic year is 2.75%. That is down from a high 2 years ago of 5.05%. The graduate rates and the parent rates on a Parent Plus loan have also decreased this year, although they are significantly higher than the undergraduate rates by design. Basically, when Congress created these loans, they said, we believe that it is more important for taxpayers to fund a first bachelor's degree or a certificate or an associate's degree than it is for us to provide funding for graduate studies or to help parents fund their students' undergraduate education. We can say that we believe this is right or wrong, but this is just the way it is. The graduate unsubsidized rate for this year is 4.3%, so clearly much higher than the 2.75 for undergrads. And this is down from its high 2 years ago of 6.6%. And the Parent Plus and the Graduate Plus is at 5.3%, down from a really high, significant high 2 years ago of 7.6%. The federal interest rate adjusts every July 1st. So these interest rates only stay in effect through June 30th, 2021. The interest rates are set by an auction of the T-bill on, I think it's the second Tuesday in May. So by mid-May, we will know what the 21-22 rates are for all of these loans. I suspect that they're not going to go up to the historic highs. They may stay the same or have a small increase or decrease. If you have a child in college, or you are in college this year or potentially next year when we see what the rates are doing, especially if it's an undergraduate rate, that 2.75% is so low. Financial planners, I am not a financial planner, I add that disclaimer, but many financial planners would tell you, even if you were going to pay for your tuition and fees in 2021 and potentially 21-22, you are better off borrowing this undergraduate loans at 2.75%, investing your money and trying to earn far more than 2.75% on your investments. And then when interest rates rise again, that may be a better time to use your investments that you've earned money on to pay down that their future tuition and fees or their student loan debt. You can consolidate these federal loans into a private loan. In the past years, many of our graduates have significantly higher interest rates, as you can see by these higher interest rates, 7.6 or 6.6. In 2020, I spent a lot of time talking with our graduates still about advising about their student loan debt. And I've seen personally where our graduates from the last 1 to 5 years have done a private consolidation loan and are getting rates as low as 2.5% fixed for the life of the loan in a private loan. That is, in my 27 years in financial aid, I have never seen private loan rates that low. And I don't think, and honestly, I kind of hope our economy is not in such a spot that we continue to see these low interest rates for an extended period of time, because that's not a good indicator of what's happening in our economy. But right now, if you're an alumni or you are a graduate and you have student loan debt that is much higher, I really encourage you to look at a private refinance to see how low you can get that rate. Generally, the standard repayment term for all of these federal loans is 10 years. The reality is, since income-driven repayment plans were created about 8 years ago, very few people select the standard repayment plan. Most students are signing up for a 20-year or a 25-year option of repayment. That doesn't mean you have to actually take 20 or 25 years to repay your loans, but it makes your monthly payment more manageable, and you can always pay more and prepay these with no penalty. Excuse me. What are some basic financial aid qualifications? First of all, for any of the grant or loan programs, you have to be a US citizen or an eligible non-citizen. You have to be enrolled in an eligible degree or certificate and have financial need as determined by the FAFSA. As long as you're going to an accredited institution, most programs, degrees and certificates, are eligible programs. And financial need, this is not a need as you or I would define it, because that would kind of be common sense. These are federal programs, and the way they determine need has nothing to do with what most of us believe. Also, in order to qualify for the Parent Plus loan or the unsubsidized loans, you actually don't need to have financial need. You could make $50 million a year and you would still qualify to take the unsubsidized loans or the Parent Plus or the Grad Plus loans. The other thing I want to address here is what I get over my career is students and parents saying, okay, well, how much can I really make? Like what gets me eligible for grants or loans and what's need? There is no magic number that says a family size of 4 can make X amount and still have need. If financial aid were actually that easy, there would be no need for us to have financial aid counselors and financial aid directors to the extent we do at universities and colleges across this country. The FAFSA looks at several factors. I'm going to talk about just a few of them. For example, your family size and how many you have in college. You could have a family size of 5, but if you have 3 kids in college versus only 1 kid in college, your need is far greater because you're funding 3 kids in college. They also look at your adjusted gross income from the tax year 2 years ago. So for the 2021 academic year, they're going to be looking at your adjusted gross income from your 2019 taxes, as well as your taxes paid, income earned from work versus investments, several classes of assets to determine, they take all of that into account when they determine your need. Certain assets, however, are not counted on the FAFSA, such as your primary home, retirement accounts such as a 401k, 403b, IRAs, pensions, etc., and the value of a small business that has 100 or fewer full-time employees is not counted as well. So that's why it's not simple for me to say, this is what a family of 4 can make to still qualify for grants and loans. Vanessa has showed up, which means there may be a Q&A that we might be able to answer.
That's right. And I just encourage everyone, if you have questions, to put it in the chat or the Q&A feature. So I have 2 questions for you, Sally. If you have an unpaid loan amount borrowed during an interest, or I would rephrase to say interest rate of 2.75, and the interest increases, does the balance then reflect the new interest rate until paid off? That's the first question.
That is a great question. I usually say that, and I forgot on this presentation. So interest rates on federal student loans are an oxymoron. They are called a fixed variable interest rate, which means if you borrow the loan at 2.75%, it is fixed for the life of the loan. That loan will always be at 2.75%. But then the loans you take out after July 1st, 2021 will be fixed at the new variable rate that was set for July 1st. So if they're fixed for the life of the loan, and then new loans after July 1st are subject to the new interest rate. So that's a great question, whoever asked that.
All right, one more for you. Is there a private company that you would recommend for refinancing student loans?
Yes, and that is, not yes, that is a question I get a lot from our graduates, and even from my friends, my personal friends. I can tell my personal friends what I want, but I can tell you that the U.S. Department of Education is very explicit about saying that financial aid offices cannot recommend one lender over another for a private loan or a private consolidation loan. And I'll give you a little bit of history. Some years ago, more than 10 years ago, there was a bit of a student loan scandal. Attorney General Cuomo at the time of New York discovered some stuff and brought some stuff to light that did not reflect well on the financial aid industry. And what that was things like financial aid directors or other people in financial aid were, say, in cahoots with, my favorite loan company, Sallie Mae, to say, hey, why don't you steer all your borrowers here, and we're going to take you on this lovely Caribbean cruise in order to say thank you for you recommending Sallie Mae as your preferred lender. Now, I say that tongue-in-cheek, that Sallie Mae is my favorite lender. That actually was my lender in college, so I don't have any problem with them. But when I tell people my name is Sally and I'm in financial aid, everybody says, oh, is your name Sallie Mae? It is not Sallie Mae. My name is Sally Ann, in case you're wondering. But don't call me that. Only my mother calls me that when she's angry at me. So that was really happening in the early 2000s. And so the US Department of Education came in and made some regulations that basically said schools could no longer do that. I did not go on a Caribbean cruise. I didn't get anything. I think I got some paid parking one time reimbursed for me that I had to go to a conference with. But other than that, there's a reason we're not allowed to recommend it. I can tell you that the majority of the lenders that are out there, as long as they're FDIC insured as a bank, they're legit lenders. They're all pretty much the same, but I also recommend you read the fine print, because one of the big differences between a private loan consolidation and the federal loans is that these private loan consolidations don't always have what I call a death benefit. Federal loans, there's only two ways to get out of federal loans: if you die or are totally and permanently disabled. Neither of those are good options, obviously. But some of these private consolidation loans do not have these death benefits or disability benefits. So I really encourage you to look at the fine print and specifically look at that, because let's just say you went to medical school or dental school or pharmacy school and you have $250,000 in student loan debt, and you do a private consolidation loan and suddenly something happens to you. You don't want your spouse or your children or your parents saddled with having to pay that $250,000 debt simply because you've died. So that's the one thing I say, look at the fine print on that. How I get the list of lenders is I Google US News and World Report best private student loan refinances, and they have a whole list of a bunch of them. Yeah, some of them are paying to get on that list, but then you go look at all of them. SoFi, Citizens One, Earnest, Laurel Road, there's usually about 10 of them that do a lot of private loan refinances. And I tell you, don't have any loyalty. You might be a Citizens Bank customer because you live on the East Coast. Don't have any loyalty to them, because almost never will they give you a benefit just simply because you're a customer. Go look at what interest rate you can get. Almost all of the private loan refinance now have a soft credit hit. So you can go look at SoFi and Earnest and Citizens and see what kind of an interest rate you can get and go with the lowest rate. I am one of these people that in my 20s, I wish I was more frugal. In my 40 somethings, I'm very frugal right now. And I look for the lowest rate possible that's going to save me the most amount of money. As an example, I re-look at my car insurance every 6 months, and I go look and get a quote from all the different other car insurance vendors, because if I can save $50 by changing to another company, I do that. Now, I know there are some companies that now have pay you for your loyalty, but when I talk about student loans, you do whatever offers you the lowest student interest rate you can get. Okay. Thank you for the questions. I'm gonna pick up here. So on this slide, so financial need is one thing. I know many of you have younger children, or you have just started to think about financial aid and going back to school. In 2008, the US Department of Education required colleges and universities to publish to their website something called a net price calculator. The net price calculator, this is only schools who admit first-time, full-time freshmen that are required to have this net price calculator. Roseman does not admit first-time, full-time students. You have to have your prerequisites done no matter which program you are looking at Roseman for. So we don't have a net price calculator, but if you're looking at a traditional school that does have freshmen, I encourage you to go look at their net price calculator, where you can enter your information, or your parents can enter their family size and income and assets, and they can get a good idea of what someone in that financial scenario from a couple years ago, the most recent completed academic year, was eligible for in both grants, loans, as well as institutional grants and loans. So if you're interested in Harvard, for example, you can go out and Google net price calculator Harvard, and you can get that and enter your information to see, based on your income, family size, assets, and if you were accepted to Harvard, then this is approximately what your financial aid package would be and how much you'd have to pay out of pocket. So if you're looking for at a particular school, I really encourage you to just Google net price calculator, University of Nevada, Reno, University of Utah, whatever it is, so that you can get a better idea of what that your financial aid package may look like at that institution. Okay, I'm going to talk about some other sources to pay for higher education. There are many, many phenomenal programs out there to help you pay for your education, usually in exchange for you working at a specific facility or for a specific employer. Many of the programs I'm going to talk about on this slide actually pay 100% of your tuition and fees, as well as a monthly stipend to help you with your living expenses. So the top section is Health Resources and Services Administration, which most of us will call HRSA. And there's several HRSA programs: NHSC, Nurse Corps, Native Hawaiian, scholarships for disadvantaged students. The bottom three, health profession student loans, loans for disadvantaged students, and scholarships for disadvantaged students, are actually available through a college or university, because they apply for these grants and then they award them to their students. But the top three are available for students to apply for, and they're usually open once a year. They're very competitive, but they are very good programs. In addition, if you're interested in military service, the military has several ways to help pay for your higher education as well. There's the traditional GI Bill if you as a student are in the military, or if your parent was in the military and they have dependent GI Bill. Basically, it's dependent programs that can pay for their children's higher education. There's a military tuition assistance program. There's a program called the Health Professions Scholarship Program, HPSP, which is for graduate level healthcare education, doctors, dentists. They actually don't have a pharmacy program right now. Occupational therapy, they have a bunch of those. They have an ROTC scholarship program for high school students. There are a lot of ways to get other people to pay for your education. I want to help illustrate just how prolific these programs are. Roseman University, for the 2021 academic year, has 20 National Health Service Corps recipients in our dental medicine program. We have one new Nurse Corps recipient in one of our BSN programs, and we have 24 dental medicine students on the military's HPSP program. We've actually been told that we have one of the highest numbers, if not the highest number, of HPSP professionals in the military at Roseman. So these are not just one in a million things. Between all of these, we have, close to 50 students receiving 100% of their tuition and fees and a monthly stipend to help pay for it. So they're real. These applications are usually only open once a year somewhere between February and May. I encourage you to Google the HRSA site, go to it. You can sign up for email alerts if you're coming to our nursing program. Sign up for the Nurse Corps alerts. If you're, they also have an NHSC, but that's for graduate nursing and dental and medical. So I encourage you, we get these alerts, we send them out to our students quite frequently, but you can get them yourself by just simply signing up for them, and they're great programs. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some other sources of financial aid besides the federal government. State grants and scholarships. The majority of states in this country have some sort of grant or scholarship program to its state residents. You have to be a resident of that state in most cases to be eligible. Many of these state programs are based on high school academics, completion, class rank, but some of them are just simply need-based. So you don't even have to be a graduate of a high school in that state to qualify. I moved to Nevada from Minnesota. Minnesota has a great Minnesota State grant program that is not tied to where you went to high school, but where you're a legal resident. So once you've lived in Minnesota for a year, you qualify for their state grant program. Nevada does not have a statewide grant program, but we do have a scholarship program called the Millennium Scholarship, which is awarded to Nevada high school graduates. You have to have a certain GPA, meet a certain curriculum, and graduate from a state public or private institution. And then the Millennium Scholarship you can use only at an institution in Nevada. So one of our state institutions or private institutions can take the Millennium Scholarship. Utah, where we also have another campus, does not have any statewide grant or scholarship programs that I'm aware of. And some states, there's a few different models on a state level, but some states with the largest average state grant awards to their students are states you probably wouldn't think of, such as South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, West Virginia. They have some of the highest average state grant awards to their students in the country. Instead of putting money to the grant and scholarship programs, many other states instead take their state resources and give them to the public institutions in the state, which reduces the overall tuition and fees that in-state students have to pay. Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, these are three of the states that have the lowest average tuition and fees for a state institution, and they follow that model. The model is low tuition, low aid. Many of the other states like South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Minnesota, because I worked there for years, have another model, which is high tuition and fees, but also high grants and scholarships from the state. There's not a right or wrong answer when it comes to the state funding, but there are a lot of opportunities out there depending on what state you're in. Also, another great opportunity for funding are institutional grants and scholarships. They can be merit-based or need-based. Many institutions, whether that's private or public, offer institutional grants and scholarships. The institutions of higher education with very large endowments, think Ivy League, Harvard, Yale, those schools have millions and millions and millions of dollars to give to institutional grants and scholarships. The average institution in the United States does not have that much money, but the large majority of us do have some sort of institutional grant and scholarship program. Merit-based funds are usually, every school makes their own rules, but they're usually based on a variety of things, such as if high school GPA for incoming freshmen, high school rank, ACT, SAT scores. They also may take into account things like your volunteerism, community service, things like that. Merit-based aid can also take into account need as well. You can get some merit and some need. And a lot of institutions use both merit and need-based aid as a recruiting tool. They use it to recruit a talented and diverse student body or to entice students to enroll in a specific degree program. Need-based aid is usually based on financial need as measured by the FAFSA as well as some other institutional scoring mechanisms, but they can also use need-based aid to recruit talented, diverse student body as well. Not all schools offer merit or need-based, and some schools just simply call it institutional aid. They don't classify it merit or need, and they have their own internal formulas on how they award it. You've probably heard that institutional aid is negotiable. If you don't get enough institutional aid, just go back to the financial aid office and tell them you want more, or you won't come to their school. While there are some schools that will do that, the vast majority of institutions stopped negotiating their institutional aid several years ago. And that's their right. They simply say, we give the best offer up front that we have available to every student, therefore it's not negotiable. I will say that some more higher demand programs and such as STEM programs now tend to want to recruit people to make their student body more diverse, whether that's gender, ethnicity, age. There's all sorts of ways that they can use their institutional aid. And sometimes if you're entering a very competitive program and you are a star in that program and you have been offered admission to that program at 3 or 4 different institutions along with institutional aid, but you really want to go to Sally's University because, you know, Sally's University is legit. They have the best parties on the weekend, and that's really, I mean, they have the best academics is what I mean, and that's where you want to go. It doesn't hurt to go back to their financial aid office to say, hey, I really want to come to Sally University, but Vanessa University offered me a little bit more money. So is there anything you can throw in to sweeten the pot? The worst they can usually say is no. I've never heard of an institution saying withdrawing their offer, but not a lot of schools are negotiating on this. Also, one of our professional associations, the National Association of College and University Business Officers, or NACUBO, put out a report in 1617 that said almost 88% of freshmen at private colleges receive some type of funding from the institution. And that funding accounted for over 56% of the average tuition and fees. In addition, 78% of all years of undergrad students at private schools receive some type of institutional aid. And another 25% of students attending public universities receive some type of aid as well. Vanessa, it looks like we might have another pertinent Q&A, correct?
Yes. Yes, those are very promising statistics too. We have a student with us tonight who is joining our pharmacy program in Henderson in 2021. And she says that she will not be working besides work study if it's approved. So how does she go about finding out how much financial aid or what loans she would need or be eligible for?
That is a great question. And from a graduate education perspective, this goes back to a few slides ago where I said that Congress changed a lot of the rules a few years ago. So graduate students are only eligible for unsubsidized and Grad Plus loans. And I wish we had more flexibility in what we can award you, but it's a very small box on what we can award for our graduate programs. So we will, for the 21-22 year, so the incoming class, we will start sending award notifications to students. We won't get our software until probably early February, mid-February is when we want to start sending those award letters out. But my contact information is going to be at the end of this slide, and I can kind of give you an idea because all of our P1s, all of our P2s, all of our P3s, they qualify for the exact same amount in unsubsidized and Grad Plus loans. In addition, I think we actually have the amounts that each of our years are eligible for on our roseman.edu under the financial aid page. And I can't remember exactly how to get there, but it's under financial aid. I think it's under cost of attendance. Somewhere in there, I think it shows either the maximum amount you can get. So check that out. Also, you're welcome. My contact information is going to be the last slide, and you can send me an email and I can help you understand that. Great questions. Okay, so another great way, more recent way to pay for education, higher education, are 529 plans. 529 plans are named after the tax code section that authorized them, and they were created in 1996, but they took a while to really get caught on. The use of 529 investment plans has increased so much since they were created. And in 2018, the last year I could actually find data on 529 plans, there was in excess of $350 billion invested in 529 plans, with almost 14 million accounts, 14 million accounts existing. These are a really nice vehicle to start saving for college for your children. I'll tell you, I have a daughter, she's 27 years old, and when she was little, I started, when these were created, I started putting a small amount in there, and then, started contributing more and more, and that's how I paid for her education. And they're a great way to do it. There's two types of 529s. There is a prepaid tuition plan, and then there's a savings plan. Nevada does have a prepaid tuition plan. And then savings plans, pretty much every state has them. A lot of investment financial advisors have different plans. All sorts of companies offer 529 plans. Some states offer matching contributions to your 529 plan based on your income as a way to encourage low income people to contribute to 529 plans. What happens is the prepaid tuition plan allows you to buy tuition for a state institution, usually a state institution, some private institutions are doing this as well, at today's rates. So you buy tuition at, say, University of Nevada, Reno, at today's rates for your child who's not going to be a freshman there for 12 years. But you get the benefit of paying, it's not exactly today's rate, but it's also not the rate that it will likely be in 12 years. And what you do is you invest that in this, or it gets invested, and you earn money on that, that amount that you have invested, same way you do in the savings plan. And then in 12 years, when your child goes to college, whether it's through the prepaid tuition or the savings plan, anything you withdraw for qualified higher education expenses, which include tuition fees, room and board, that amount that's withdrawn is not taxable. The other thing, parents can start these, grandparents can start these, godparents can start these, anybody can start a 529, and you essentially put someone as the beneficiary. So the 529 I purchased for my daughter was in my name, but it had her as the beneficiary. So if your child decides not to pursue a higher education, or they choose a very low cost higher education that doesn't cost as much, so you have additional money left over in that 529, you can actually designate someone else to use that 529 in the future. If your child doesn't go to college, you can put your second child as the beneficiary, and gee, now they've got two 529s and maybe they get to go to Harvard. Or you can put the beneficiary as yourself or your spouse, or if you decide to pursue higher education, or if no one in your family decides to pursue higher education, you can actually take the money out of a 529 for other purposes. Now you're going to take a tax hit on the money you've made in it. But that is one of the things that was so attractive about a 529 plan for a lot of parents when they were created in the late 90s. I want to add one small word of caution. 529 plans that are owned by parents or a student have to be reported on the FAFSA as an asset. So some of those assets I was referring to earlier, a 529 plan is one of those. What I have seen in my career is sometimes grandparents or an aunt or an uncle or a godparent start a 529 plan, and that person owns the plan. They do not have to report the asset's value on the FAFSA because their information is not on the FAFSA. However, if I had a 529 plan for my niece, she would not report that asset on it. But if I paid for her freshman year out of that 529, when she does her FAFSA for her sophomore year, the money that I paid, that was paid out from the 529 on her behalf, does have to be included as money paid on the student's behalf on the FAFSA. But that amount is treated differently than, say, the asset is. Other ways to fund your higher education: private scholarships. Scholarships do not have to be repaid. Free money is good money. So I really encourage you. We see a lot of, high school seniors, they do a lot of private scholarship applications. But I think what I see at Roseman, because our students are not coming right from high school, a lot of our students are into their 20s, some even into their 30s or 40s. They don't feel like they want to apply for private scholarships. And I will tell you, there is more competition for scholarships for high school seniors than there is for scholarships for older students. And the reason is because all of us parents are telling our seniors, you better get right in that essay and you better be applying for these scholarships. And these students are in that mode. And there's not as much competition because students are not applying for private scholarships when they're going back to school at a later time. And I really encourage you to do that. I'll tell you what I did when I went to college. I wrote an essay and I just tweaked it for every scholarship that I went to apply for. This one might ask, what was your defining moment as a child? This one might say, what's the biggest adversity you overcame? This might say, why do you want to be a nurse? You can take that standard template of a scholarship essay and just tweak it and make it go for the scholarship you're applying for. I really encourage you, everyone, to do that and apply for as much free money as you can. Free money is good money. I joke when I'm talking to incoming students that I would write an essay at this point in my career for a $500 check. So why students won't write an essay for $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 scholarships is beyond me, because I do it now at this point in my career. Okay, employer tuition remission and reimbursement. If you're already employed somewhere that offers tuition remission for you to say you're a nurse and you work for someplace that's going to pay for you to go get your BSN, or they offer tuition reimbursement. They won't pay for the full amount, but hey, this is applicable to your current position. We will pay $5,000 a year to help you. That, again, that's free money that you can get. The other thing that sometimes is missed is parents. If you have younger children, sometimes you need to look at your own employer to see, do they have a reimbursement or a remission agreement, so you could send your child somewhere. Now, obviously, we work at a higher education institution. Roseman does offer that, and almost every, not almost every higher education institution I've worked at does offer that for dependents of employees. But there are even some bigger university systems. There is a coalition of private Catholic universities across the United States that if your parent works at that, okay, maybe they don't have the degree you want at the school your mom works at, but they have an agreement where if you go to that school in another city or state, you might be able to get a 50% tuition discount. So I really encourage you to look at all options. Also, these last two, state and private loan programs. There are a lot of private loan programs to even assist with paying for your education. There's also some state loan programs that offer lower interest rates than some of the federal rates. I'm going to talk about student loan forgiveness now. I've talked about this in other presentations, but I want to hit on this again. Public service loan forgiveness and teacher loan forgiveness and income-driven repayment forgiveness are the 3 federal loan forgiveness programs. PSLF and teacher loan forgiveness are not taxable due to you're working for a nonprofit or a government entity or a K-12 school. Income-driven repayment forgiveness is taxable when that happens. The income-driven repayment plans or IDR plans have not been around long enough for anybody to get forgiveness yet. The earliest forgiveness we're going to be able to see on those is 2032. So right now, any forgiveness that would happen in 2032 or later is taxable. Congress could change that. I cannot predict what Congress is going to do next month, let alone in 2032. So there is a chance that that would not be taxable in the future, but I don't think that's likely because it is a pretty big benefit if you've been in repayment for 20 years and then they forgive the balance. PSLF and teacher forgiveness, again, not taxable because you're generally you're making less money than in the private sector, nonprofit government entities. So that's why they don't make those programs taxable. We hear a lot with the recent election, we hear a lot about student loan forgiveness, or we have been hearing a lot about that in the media. There is proposals and and not so much proposals, there's talk of proposals of forgiving $10,000 as soon as President-elect Biden takes office, $10,000 for every borrower. There was talk about forgiving $50,000 for healthcare professionals. There was talk about changing public service loan forgiveness. Right now, you have to be employed at that nonprofit or government entity for 10 years. At the end of 10 years, 100% of your loans are forgiven. There was a talk about, oh, maybe we forgive 50% of your student loan debt after 5 years of service, 70% after 7 years, etc. All of that. It is just talk. There is nothing that has passed. There's not even any bills that have been introduced that I'm aware of. There might have been a couple, but they were killed before they even got to a full vote. I will tell you that I think the chances of there being widespread forgiveness on student loans, whether that's 10,000, 50,000, or anything in between, is very, very slim. I know I hate to be the wet blanket. I could say, yay, that would be great. It really would be great. But I just think the amount of money it would cost to taxpayers is so astronomical that it is very unlikely to pass. Even if we had an entire Senate and House that was democratically controlled, because they tend to be the ones that have been proposing these, I still think it is very unlikely that we're going to see that. So I really hate to burst anyone's bubble that might have been hoping that some of those were going to come to fruition. Again, I can't predict what Congress is going to do, so maybe they will, but I don't want people borrowing student loans thinking that they're going to get them forgiven in the future, $10,000 or $50,000. So actually, all of these forgiveness programs, in theory, could be taken away by Congress at any time. I don't anticipate seeing them go away completely in the long run. What we may see, particularly under the income-driven repayment forgiveness, is some changes to how they work. But again, at this point, I don't anticipate any of them going away or changing too dramatically. Also, 47 states plus Washington, D.C. have loan forgiveness programs. Some states have multiple loan forgiveness programs, and I really encourage you, depending on what state you're living in and working in, to research those. Nevada only has one program, and it's only for nurses, and there's minimal funding, but that bodes well for a lot of our nurses who end up staying in Nevada. So I'm going to talk about some other student loan forgiveness. They're not forgiveness, but they're loan repayment plans. the Army, Navy, National Guard all have loan repayment programs. Most of them require active duty service, but there are some for the reserves as well. HRSA, again, has several student loan repayment programs. The NHSC program, that the first thing I talked about was paying up front. That's their scholarship program. They also have a loan repayment program. The NHSC is not taxable by federal statute. Almost all of the other loan repayment programs that are offered by third parties are taxable. So if Nurse Corps pays off $25,000 of your student loans because you get the Nurse Corps loan repayment program, that $25,000 is going to be taxed on your federal and probably state taxes. Faculty loan repayment program, HRSA has a bunch of programs. I know of at least one Roseman faculty member who was awarded the faculty loan repayment program. It's a great program. I also know more than 5 students of our graduates of our DMD program that were awarded the National Health Service Corps student to service loan repayment program. These are great programs. If you can't get them to pay for your funding or your schooling up front, this is another way to help eliminate your student loan debt by getting them to pay for it in the back end. And many of those repayment programs, NHSC, Nurse Corps, I'm not sure about the faculty loan program. They're usually awarded for 2 years at a time. So you get some amount, might be $20,000 each for each of your 2-year obligation. And then many of them allow you to reapply for it for another 2 years. So if you can get $25,000 for 2 years, that's $50,000, and then you apply and you get it again, there's another $50,000 that you could get repaid. And these are all while working at eligible employers. So you're getting a paycheck too. You're working a job. Now you might not earn as much money at an eligible institution, or an eligible employer, but you're also getting a significant portion of your student loan debt forgiven as well. So I just want to take a couple of seconds to talk about, for those of you, we have some prospective students, we have current students. I just want to frame up the financial aid at Roseman with a couple of bullet points. First of all, in the 1920 academic year, the last year that was completed, about 83% of Roseman students received some type of financial aid. That includes federal, state, institutional, or private financial aid. Because we offer a large amount of our students are enrolled in graduate degrees, as I've said several times, that means student loan debt. The graduate graduate level education doesn't get the grants. So a large majority of our students are borrowing student loans. What I like to tell students that some students just say, oh no, I don't want to do that. But I try to think about this in a different way. Yeah, student loan. I took student loans when I went to school 26, 7, 8, 9, however many years ago that was, eons ago. So student loans have been around for a long time, and a lot of people borrow them. Depending on how much they borrow really is up to the type of program, the type of school, and how much also private funding you have to help you. But what happens is when students graduate, the U.S. Department of Education measures how many students how many students are unable to repay their loans in the first 3 years after graduation. That's called defaulting. So they measure that cohort default rate, or CDR, and the last year that is available for was fiscal year 17. Roseman's cohort default rate for fiscal year 17 was 1.2%. That was a slight increase from our FY16 rate of 1.0%, and the year before that, 0.9%. I say that for a couple of reasons. What that means is, to me, is number one, our students are educated about their student loans. They're getting the information they need to understand their student loans, to understand their obligations, And number two, they're very likely getting jobs where they can afford to repay those student loans. And the average default rate for private colleges that offer a 4-year or more degree in the United States for fiscal year 17 was 7.1%. So this is one of those markers in financial aid that I love to be well below average, because below average is a good thing. And I take a lot of pride in our cohort default rates being so low, because I do believe very much in the education we're providing. Healthcare education is so needed in this country, and I think it's a really good investment. Even though you're going to have to take out student loans, the majority of students, the jobs you're hopefully able to get are able to repay that successfully. Also, another program, which if you've heard me talk on admissions interviews, you would have heard about, a new program Roseman started to offer is called the Roseman Success Fund ISA Income Share Agreement. This is new for the 2021 academic year. And there is no institution in the United States that can guarantee that you're going to get a job or that you're going to pass the boards and get licensed. But Roseman really does believe so wholeheartedly in the education that we're providing that we decided to put our money where our mouth was. So what we're doing is we are actually giving you the additional funds to pay for your tuition and fees after you take out the federal sub and unsubsidized loan if you're qualified for them. And then you repay us in the future as a percentage of your income. So if you can't find a job earning a certain amount, depending on what your program is, your required repayment on the Roseman Success Fund ISA is $0. Again, no school can guarantee you're going to earn a certain income. So each of our programs has a different minimum income. As an example, the College of Pharmacy minimum income is $65,000. So if you earn less than $65,000 after pharmacy school, your required repayment on the Roseman Success Fund would be $0 a month. You basically pay that for a period up to, our longest program I think is 12 or 15 years for dental. And you pay a percentage of your income, and that percentage varies as well. But again, if you can't find a job, your repayment is $0. So I think this is a great tool for students to use. This year, the federal student loan interest rates are much lower than they have been in years past. But when you start looking at the Roseman Success Fund and the percent of income you're going to have to repay versus the Grad Plus loan 2 years ago at 7.6% and 4.2% in fees, honestly, at certain times like that, it's a no-brainer on what's a better investment. Now, I can't tell you what's best for you because everybody needs to make their own decision. But I really am very happy with, and have heard from students that they are very happy with the opportunity the Roseman Success Fund has afforded them to be able to come to school. Okay, in closing, just a couple of bullet points. First of all, if we go back to what I'm saying from the very beginning, if you have younger children or if you're looking at colleges yourself, academic performance matters. You have to be, when it comes to getting financial aid, particularly merit-based and scholarships. Also, if you have younger children, save early and save often for your children's education, whether that's investing in the stock market, a 529, a prepaid tuition plan. Start when they're young because higher education is expensive. And choose the best school for you. I have been in this business 27 years, and I have had parents. I used to do a lot of public speaking at high schools in Minnesota, and parents would call me up and say, hey, can you tell my daughter Sally that she should not go to the University of Hawaii, that's not the best choice for her. And I just will refuse parents and say, I'm not going to do that, because what's best for your child, although they're 18 at the time, might might need some help understanding what the consequences of choosing the University of Hawaii are at a $50,000 a year tuition rate for 4 years, I can inform them, but you have to figure out what is the best school for you. And that could be that example I gave earlier. It really could be because you have the best frat parties on the weekends. Not the reason to pick a school, but we all know that some students do that. Or it might be that you choose the school so that you can continue to live at home because your family doesn't have a lot of money and can't afford to pay for room and board on campus. Whatever the best option for you is, only you can decide that. Well, you and your parents. One of my favorite things we like to say at Roseman is live like a college student. While you're in school, live like a student. Don't be spending money. That Starbucks 7 days a week, all that stuff adds up. Live like a college student while you're a student. You have the rest of your life to live like whatever it is you're going to school for. And then love what you do. Whatever you decide to do for higher education, and I don't care if it's getting your doctor of dental medicine or a cosmetology degree. Whatever is right for you and whatever you love, I believe wholeheartedly that's what you should do. Okay, so I see there's some Q&A up there. I am putting up my direct phone number and my email. Even if you're not a Roseman student, even if you're not interested in coming to Roseman, I do offer this, if you've attended this, that you can contact me if you have some general questions that I might be able to answer for you. I'm not always in the office, as pretty much nobody is in 2020, COVID time, as I like to refer to it. So if you're interested, I really suggest sending me an email. And if we want to have a phone conversation or a Zoom, I'm happy to set that up anytime, but definitely feel free to reach out if there's anything I can do. And I think we have some other Q&A, correct, Vanessa?
Yes, we have 2 questions about the ISAs.
Yes.
So the first question is, if we apply for an ISA and it only covers the cost of schooling, can we also apply for private loans to cover home life, bills, food, personal needs?
That is a great question. And the answer is no. And here's why. We do not think it is in a student's best interest to take out federal loans, ISAs, and private loans. When you look at the amount of repayment you're going to have to do when you're done with school, it doesn't make financial sense. And when I say, 3 years after graduation, you will be cursing Sally's name and saying, why did she let me do that? So we have just made the decision that we don't think it's in the student's best interest, which is also why the ISA is not for everybody. So if you need money to help you with living expenses, a lot of our students are relocating to one of our campuses from another state. If you need that, the private loan is really the best option for you. The ISA is really, it's intended for students who do not need that. But that's a great question.
Thanks, Sally. Another question on the ISA, how will loan forgiveness potentially affect our ISA program?
Oh, that's a good question, and honestly, one I had not thought about. The ISA is not a loan. I didn't go into all the details about what an ISA is, but an ISA is a contract between you and the university. Lots of other universities across the United States are using these. So it would not qualify for any kind of loan forgiveness. Also, I'm going to say that private loans generally don't qualify for loan forgiveness either. So if you were thinking about taking a private loan and then applying for one of those loan repayment programs, whether that's PSLF or military or things like that, most of those repayment programs and forgiveness programs only apply to federal student loans.
Great. We'll give it a minute to see if there are any final questions before we wrap up.
I really appreciate everyone attending while we're seeing if any other questions come in, and hopefully you found this presentation to be useful.
Let's see. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. Just give it one more second. There's someone that raised his hand and I have to figure out how to, I might need Cameron for that. We have a raised hand. Do I just choose invite, Cam?
Oh, we must have lost Cameron.
Let's see. No.
I do see that someone asked if I have a template for scholarship essays, and I really don't. What I would encourage you to do is go search some scholarships, use some of the free scholarship search sites. Don't ever pay money for somebody to find you scholarships. That's a scam. And then just look at some of the things they're looking at. For the most part, a lot of them are going to be, why do you want to be an X? Why do you want to be a pharmacist, a nurse, a doctor, a dentist? Like, think back. And then a lot of them also are around community service and volunteerism.
All right. There's one last question from a faculty member that I think we'll just we'll do offline. So thank you for that question. And let's see if there are any at all. Thank you for the information and your time. Well, we thank all of you and we thank Sally Mickelson. And we're really grateful to have you here tonight and wish everyone a very happy and healthy holiday season. And please check out speakers.roseman.edu to find out about future Neighborhood Health Series webinars. Thank you so much, Sally. Thank you.
Thank you.